Autumn promises. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and possibility as Eleanor Blackwood hurried across Westfield University's sprawling campus. She clutched her portfolio case against her chest, protecting it from the light drizzle that had begun to fall. Being late to Professor Harrington's seminar was not an option, especially when she was presenting her thesis proposal on Renaissance symbolism in portraiture. At 22, Eleanor embodied the perfect Blackwood heiress, poised, brilliant, and destined for greatness in the art world. The weight of family expectation had been her constant companion since childhood, when she could recite the names of famous painters before she could tie her shoes. The Blackwoods weren't just wealthy, they were cultural gatekeepers, with a private collection that rivaled small museums and a foundation that funded major exhibitions across the country. She darted through a shortcut between the humanities buildings when her heel caught on an uneven brick. Eleanor tumbled forward, her portfolio flying open as she fell, sending her carefully arranged prints scattering across the wet pavement. "No, no, no," she gasped, scrambling to gather her work before the moisture destroyed months of research. "Here, let me help." A warm voice accompanied a hand reaching for a sheet that had begun to blow away. Eleanor looked up to find herself staring into the most earnest brown eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a young man with untamed dark curls and a camera hanging around his neck. He knelt beside her, carefully collecting her papers with surprising gentleness for his large hands. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the rescued documents. "I'm already late, and if these were ruined, I understand completely." He smiled, revealing a slight dimple in his left cheek. "Art history, right? Renaissance period?" Eleanor nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" The Botticelli annotations gave it away. He gestured to the papers he'd handed her. "I'm Julian Rivera, by the way, photography department." Eleanor Blackwood. Art history. Recognition flickered in Julian's eyes at her surname, but unlike most people who immediately shifted into networking mode upon learning of her family connections, his expression remained unchanged. "You'd better get to wherever you're going before these get wet again," Julian said, helping her secure the last of her papers. "Though I think Professor Harrington will forgive you once he sees your analysis of symbolic geometry. That's pretty groundbreaking stuff." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You've read Harrington's work?" "I audit his lectures sometimes. Photography might be my medium, but understanding visual storytelling throughout history helps me create better images." Julian's passion was evident in his voice. The way light was manipulated in Renaissance paintings is basically the foundation of all good photography. The rain began to fall harder, and Julian quickly shrugged off his worn denim jacket, holding it over Eleanor's portfolio. "Come on, I'll walk you to the humanities building." Under the inadequate shelter of Julian's jacket, Eleanor discovered more about him in their 5-minute walk than she sometimes learned about her socialite acquaintances in years. Julian was a scholarship student from Philadelphia, working 3 jobs to supplement his financial aid while pursuing his passion for documentary photography. His senior project focused on capturing the dignity of service workers across the city. When they reached the building entrance, Eleanor reluctantly handed back his now damp jacket. "Thank you for rescuing me. And my thesis. Anytime," Julian smiled. "Maybe I'll see you around campus." "I'd like that," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her sincerity. That chance meeting should have been nothing more than a pleasant memory. The kind stranger, the rainy day, the rescued thesis. But 3 days later, when Eleanor spotted Julian photographing autumn leaves in the university arboretum, she found herself approaching him. And when he invited her to see his exhibition at the student gallery the following week, she accepted, without hesitation. What began as artistic admiration quickly evolved into something deeper. Julian showed Eleanor how to view the world through a camera lens, finding beauty in overlooked moments. Eleanor introduced Julian to the technical brilliance of classical art, spending hours with him at the university's collection. Their different perspectives created a perfect balance. Julian's raw, authentic approach to art complementing Eleanor's more structured historical understanding. By Thanksgiving, they were inseparable. Julian's tiny apartment above a coffee shop became Eleanor's favorite place in the world. There, surrounded by his photographs and the scent of brewing coffee from below, they talked until dawn about art, dreams, and the future they might share. When Julian kissed her for the first time against the backdrop of his makeshift darkroom, Eleanor knew she had found something real, something that transcended the carefully orchestrated relationships her parents had always encouraged. "I'm not what your family would want for you," Julian whispered one night as they lay looking at the stars through his skylight. Eleanor turned to face him, tracing the outline of his profile with her fingertip. "You're exactly what I want for me. The rest doesn't matter." But as December approached and the semester wound down, Eleanor knew she couldn't avoid introducing Julian to her world forever. The annual Blackwood Foundation Christmas Gala was approaching, a significant event in both the social and art worlds. Taking Julian would be a statement, a declaration that she chose him regardless of his background. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked as they stood outside the Blackwood estate, his rental tuxedo slightly too large at the shoulders. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I've never been more certain of anything." What she couldn't know was that crossing that threshold with Julian would change everything, setting in motion events that would separate them for years to come, before fate would offer them another chance at the love they were about to lose. Winter's Divide. The Blackwood Foundation Christmas Gala transformed the family's historic mansion into a wonderland of crystals and white roses. Renowned artists mingled with wealthy patrons, while waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more than Julian's monthly rent. Eleanor felt Julian tense beside her as they entered the grand ballroom. His eyes widened at the Monet hanging casually in the entryway. Not a print, but an original worth millions. "You grew up with that just hanging there," he whispered. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Try not to look too impressed. My father feeds on that." As they moved through the crowd, Eleanor introduced Julian to colleagues from the art world, carefully positioning him as a promising emerging photographer. Julian spoke passionately about his work, documenting the lives of the city's essential workers, earning genuine interest from several gallery owners. "He's quite articulate for a scholarship student," came a cool voice from behind them. Eleanor's mother, Victoria Blackwood, approached in a midnight blue gown that complemented her silver-streaked dark hair. Her smile was perfect, and perfectly empty. "Mother, this is Julian Rivera, the photographer I told you about." Victoria's gaze assessed Julian like he was a painting of questionable provenance. "Charmed. Eleanor, your father needs you to greet the Whitmores. They've just made another substantial donation to the foundation." "I'll introduce Julian to them as well," Eleanor replied. "That won't be necessary," Victoria said smoothly. "Mr. Rivera might be more comfortable speaking with Garrett Pembroke. He's looking to commission some photographs for his new downtown development." Before Eleanor could protest, her mother had led Julian toward a silver-haired man across the room. The message was clear. Julian might be tolerated as a potential foundation beneficiary, but not as her date. Throughout the evening, Eleanor watched her parents systematically separate her from Julian, introducing her to the son of a prominent gallery owner, then a young curator from the Metropolitan Museum. By midnight, frustration knotted in her chest. She finally spotted Julian alone on the terrace, his breath clouding in the December air. "I'm sorry," she said, joining him. "My parents are experts at making someone feel like they're simultaneously invisible and under a microscope." Julian gave her a tight smile. "It's fine, I knew what I was walking into." Eleanor leaned against the stone balustrade. "They don't matter. What we have matters." Julian's expression softened as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You believe that now. But Eleanor, this is your world. These connections, these people, they're your future. You're my future," she insisted, pulling him close. Later that night, as they said goodbye outside Julian's apartment, neither knew that Victoria Blackwood was already making calls. By morning, Eleanor's father was waiting for her in his study. "I've looked into your photographer friend," Richard Blackwood said without preamble. "High school in a rough neighborhood in Philadelphia. Father unknown. Mother worked as a hotel maid until she died when he was 16. Lived with his grandmother after that. Talented, certainly, but hardly appropriate for a Blackwood. That's absurdly elitist even for you, Eleanor shot back. Richard's expression hardened. What's absurd is watching my daughter throw away generations of careful connections for a boy playing at being an artist. Do you think his little student exhibits compare to what we can offer you? The directorship at the Blackwood Gallery is practically yours. I love him. Love. Her father's dismissive tone made the word sound childish. You're 22. What you feel is infatuation, not love. You can't control who I see, Eleanor insisted. No, but I control your trust fund, your position at the foundation, and your academic funding. Richard opened a folder on his desk. Julian Rivera has been offered a prestigious photography fellowship in Berlin. 6 months, all expenses paid, with connections to major European galleries. Eleanor's heart plummeted. What did you do? I made a few calls. Created an opportunity. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. If he has any real talent, this will launch his career. If not, well, at least you'll find out now rather than years down the road. That night, when Julian called her, excited about the unexpected fellowship offer, Eleanor felt her world fracturing. She couldn't tell him the truth, that her father had orchestrated it to separate them. Julian's photography was his passion, his future. Who was she to stand in the way? It's an incredible opportunity, she forced herself to say. You have to take it. But as January arrived and Julian's departure loomed, Eleanor found herself pulled between two impossible choices. Her parents had made it clear. If she followed Julian to Europe, she would be cut off, not just financially, but from the art world connections that had been cultivated for her since birth. The night before Julian's flight, they sat in his nearly empty apartment, surrounded by packed boxes. Come with me, Julian said suddenly. We can figure it out together. I'll have the stipend and you could find work in a gallery there. Eleanor's heart clenched. She imagined it, a tiny apartment in Berlin, struggling to pay bills, Julian working. Long hours while she tried to build connections from scratch, and if it didn't work out, she would have sacrificed everything and he would resent her for it. I can't, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. My thesis, the foundation work. I can't just abandon everything. She couldn't bring herself to tell him the full truth, that her father had threatened to withdraw not just her support, but the foundation grant funding Julian's former neighborhood arts center. Richard Blackwood was ruthless when protecting family interests. So this is it? Julian's voice broke. Everything we talked about, everything we planned, it was just fantasy? Maybe it's for the best, Eleanor said, the words tasting like ash. Your career is taking off. I have my commitments here, a long-distance relationship across continents. It would only end painfully later. Julian stared at her, disbelief etched across his features. This doesn't sound like you. What happened? After the gala, did your parents get to you? This is my decision, Eleanor insisted, hating the lie. We're from different worlds, Julian. Maybe we were fooling ourselves thinking it could work. The pain that flashed across Julian's face would haunt Eleanor for years. I never thought you'd choose their world over what we had. I'm not choosing. Yes, you are. Julian stepped back. You know what? Take this. He handed her the small wrapped package he'd brought, his going-away gift to her. Open it after I'm gone. Eleanor left his apartment for the last time, snow beginning to fall around her, obscuring her footprints as she walked away from the only person who had ever seen her as just Eleanor, not a Blackwood. The next morning, Julian boarded his flight to Berlin. Eleanor opened his gift alone in her apartment, a handmade book of photographs he had taken of her when she wasn't aware, studying in the library, laughing in autumn sunlight, sleeping peacefully with an open book on her chest. On the final page he had written, "To seeing the world through eyes that truly love what they behold." Eleanor placed the book in her bedside drawer and did what Blackwoods had always done with inconvenient emotions. She buried them beneath work and obligation. She threw herself into completing her thesis and took on additional responsibilities at the foundation. By spring, she had accepted a date with Thomas Hargrove, the son of her father's business partner, and a rising curator at the Museum of Modern Art. By summer, they were officially a couple. By winter, she wore his engagement ring, a flawless diamond that felt as cold and hard as the hollow space in her chest where her heart used to be. In Berlin, Julian's fellowship photographs documenting the lives of immigrant workers received critical acclaim. Eleanor read about his success online but never reached out. Some bridges once burned leave only ashes too painful to sift through. And so, separated by an ocean of distance and the glacial weight of family expectations, they began building separate lives, unaware that fate would eventually offer them a second chance at the love that winter had so cruelly divided. Spring ventures. 8 years passed like turning pages of a book Eleanor wasn't sure she wanted to read. She married Thomas Hargrove in a lavish ceremony featured in Vogue, with 600 guests and not a single genuine smile from the bride. The marriage produced one joy: her daughter Charlotte, now 4 years old with curious eyes and a spirit that reminded Eleanor of the freedom she had once felt in Julian's tiny apartment. The divorce came 3 years into the marriage, after why Eleanor discovered Thomas's affairs with a succession of gallery assistants. The Blackwoods closed ranks, minimizing the scandal while ensuring Eleanor retained her position as director of the prestigious Blackwood collection. Her father, never one to waste a crisis, spun the narrative perfectly. Eleanor, as the devoted mother and art conservator, too committed to her work and child to sustain a marriage with a philanderer. On this bright April morning, Eleanor sat in her office overlooking Central Park, reviewing acquisition proposals. At 30, she had achieved everything her parents had planned for her: professional respect, social standing, and a carefully curated public image. If happiness wasn't part of that equation, well, that was a private matter. Ms. Blackwood? Her assistant Priya appeared at the door. The board approved your proposal for the New Perspectives exhibition. You have complete curatorial control. Eleanor smiled, genuinely pleased. This exhibition was her vision: contemporary photographers documenting social change across continents. For once, the Blackwood name would be associated with art that spoke to current realities rather than preserving the past. Thank you, Priya. Let's start reaching out to the artists on our shortlist. After Priya left, Eleanor opened her laptop to review the list. The exhibition would feature 15 photographers from diverse backgrounds, each bringing unique perspectives on communities in transition. Her eyes paused on a name she had deliberately included yet feared seeing: Julian Rivera. In the years since Berlin, Julian had become exactly what her father had mockingly predicted: a significant talent. His series documenting factory closures across the American Midwest had won the prestigious Herrick Award. More recently, his photographs of climate refugees had been acquired by major museums worldwide. His work was exactly what the exhibition needed, and Eleanor told herself that was the only reason she had included him. She hesitated before drafting the formal invitation. Their last interaction had been that snowy night in his apartment. Would he even agree to participate in a Blackwood Foundation exhibition? Worse, would he accept out of professional obligation, forcing them into polite, sterile interactions that would mock what they once shared? Eleanor pushed these thoughts aside and composed a standard invitation, addressing him as Mr. Rivera and signing with her full professional title. She sent it before she could reconsider, then turned to other matters. 3,000 miles away in his San Francisco studio, Julian Rivera studied a series of prints spread across a large wooden table. At 31, he had built a life that would have seemed impossible to the scholarship student from Philadelphia. His photographs commanded impressive prices, and his commercial work for select socially conscious brands provided financial security that allowed him to pursue personal projects without compromise. Success had come at the cost of constant travel and relentless work. After Berlin had opened doors, Julian had moved between assignments and exhibitions with barely a pause: London, Nairobi, Bangkok, Rio. Only in the past year had he established this permanent base in San Francisco, converting an old warehouse, into a studio and living space filled with books, plants, and carefully chosen artwork. "These are powerful, Julian," said Zoe Winters, his agent, examining the prints. "The contrast between the corporate headquarters and the displaced community really indicts the whole system without a single caption." Julian nodded, making slight adjustments to the sequence. "I'm thinking of adding a final image, something that suggests possibility, not just loss." "Always the optimist," Zoe smiled. "That's what separates your work from other documentary photographers. You never leave viewers in despair." "I've seen too many beginnings after supposed endings to believe anything is truly finished," Julian replied. Zoe glanced at her phone. "You've got an invitation from the Blackwood Foundation for their new Perspectives exhibition. That's a prestigious platform." Julian froze at the name, memories cascading through him like a waterfall. "The Blackwood Foundation?" "Yes, curated by Eleanor Blackwood herself." Zoe studied his reaction. "You know her?" Julian turned away, organizing prints that were already perfectly arranged. "We met in college, briefly. Well, it's a significant opportunity. The exhibition will travel to London, Tokyo, and Sydney after New York. Should I accept?" 8 years of discipline almost made Julian decline immediately. He had built his career without leveraging connections to wealthy patrons, especially ones with the surname Blackwood. But curiosity and something deeper he refused to name made him pause. "Forward me the details. I'll think about it." That night, alone in his loft, Julian opened Eleanor's email. The formal language and professional signature revealed nothing of the woman who had once traced constellations on his ceiling. He found himself searching for her online, something he had deliberately avoided for years. Recent photographs showed Eleanor at gallery openings and charity events, elegantly dressed and perfectly poised. A few featured her with a young girl, who had Eleanor's eyes but darker hair. His heart contracted at the realization that Eleanor had a child, tangible proof of the life she had built without him. Further searching revealed her divorce 3 years earlier. Julian was surprised at the complex emotions this information stirred. Not satisfaction at her failed marriage, but a peculiar sadness that she had experienced that pain. After hours of deliberation, Julian responded to the exhibition invitation, with simple acceptance matching her professional tone. The Eleanor who had broken his heart belonged to the past. This was a professional opportunity, nothing more. In New York, Eleanor's careful compartmentalization began to crumble when Julian's acceptance arrived. Over the following weeks, as she corresponded with the other photographers, she maintained strict professionalism in her communications with Julian. Yet each time his name appeared in her inbox, her heart performed the same treacherous leap. Spring advanced into early summer. Eleanor divided her time between exhibition preparations and creating a stable home for Charlotte, who was thriving, despite the divorce. The little girl had inherited Eleanor's love for art, but expressed it with an uninhibited joy that Eleanor sometimes envied. One evening, as Eleanor tucked Charlotte into bed, the child asked a question that pierced her carefully. Constructed facade. "Mommy, are you happy?" Eleanor smoothed her daughter's dark curls. "Of course I am, sweetheart. I have you, don't I?" Charlotte's serious expression didn't waver. "But Daddy has Natalie now, and they laugh a lot. You don't laugh like that." The observation, so innocent and so devastating, lingered with Eleanor long after Charlotte had fallen asleep. When had she last laughed freely? Had it been with Julian in that other lifetime? Across the country, Julian found himself equally preoccupied as the exhibition approached. He selected his contributions carefully, images that represented his artistic evolution but revealed nothing of his personal journey. Yet as his departure date for New York drew closer, memories he had suppressed for years resurfaced with startling clarity. He remembered Eleanor's expression when she first held his camera, her concentration as she framed a shot of raindrops on autumn leaves. He recalled her passionate defense of a student artist whose work had been criticized as too political. Most painfully, he remembered her tears that final night, when something in her explanation had never quite rung true. A rare evening at home, Julian found himself opening a locked drawer in his studio. Inside lay a collection of photographs never exhibited, never shared. Eleanor in moments of unguarded beauty, captured by a man who had loved her completely. He had kept them not out of sentimentality but as proof that what they'd shared had been real, even if it hadn't been enough. As Julian carefully returned the photographs to their hiding place, his phone chimed with an email notification. The final exhibition details from Eleanor included a preview reception for the artists, 2 days before the public opening. In just over a week, they would stand face to face again. No longer the passionate students who had believed love could transcend class barriers, but accomplished professionals shaped by choices both made and forced upon them. Julian confirmed his attendance with a brief reply, then turned back to his packing with a strange certainty that something significant awaited him in New York, beyond the professional recognition the exhibition would bring. Meanwhile, in her Manhattan apartment, Eleanor closed her laptop after receiving Julian's confirmation. She moved to her bedroom window, watching summer lightning illuminate the city skyline. The approaching exhibition had forced her to confront truths she had long avoided, that her parents' interference had altered the course of her life, that her marriage had been built on expectations rather than love, and that despite 8 years of careful avoidance, the thought of seeing Julian again filled her with both terror and a shameful, persistent hope. As thunder rolled across the city, Eleanor made a decision. When Julian arrived, she would offer him one thing that had been missing from their painful separation: the truth. Whether it would matter after all this time, she couldn't know. But as Charlotte's innocent question had reminded her, a life without authentic joy was merely existence, and Eleanor was finally ready to seek something more. Summer reunion. The Blackwood Gallery's modernist glass facade captured the late June sunset, transforming the building into a gleaming amber beacon against Manhattan's skyline. Inside, staff made final preparations for the artists' preview reception. Eleanor stood in the center of the main exhibition space, surveying the photographs that lined the walls. Powerful images from 15 artists whose work told stories of resilience, struggle, and transformation. Her gaze lingered on Julian's installation, a series documenting the rebirth of a Rust Belt town after its primary factory had closed. The final image showed 2 elderly former workers planting a community garden in the factory's shadow, their weathered faces alight with purpose. It exemplified what had made Julian's work so celebrated: his ability to find hope within hardship, beauty amid decay. "Everything looks perfect," said Priya, joining her. "The artists have started arriving. They're in the reception area." Eleanor nodded, smoothing her midnight blue dress. She had chosen it carefully, elegant but understated, professional yet not austere. "I'll be there momentarily." After Priya left, Eleanor permitted herself a final moment of private emotion. 8 years of carefully maintained distance were about to collapse. Whatever happened tonight would require strength she wasn't certain she possessed. In the reception area, Julian accepted a glass of champagne while exchanging pleasantries with fellow photographers. At 31, he carried himself with quiet confidence, his once untamed curls now cut shorter, his student wardrobe replaced by a well-tailored charcoal suit. Yet observant eyes might notice his slight restlessness, the way he periodically glanced toward the exhibition entrance. "Julian Rivera, I've admired your work for years." A curator from the Whitney Museum approached, momentarily distracting him from his vigilance. "Thank you. I've appreciated your exhibitions as well," Julian replied, engaging in the professional conversation, while maintaining awareness of the room's subtle shift when Eleanor finally entered. She moved through the gathering, with practiced grace, greeting artists individually, her posture perfect and smile measured. Julian watched her approach through the crowd, struck by how she embodied both change and constancy, still recognizably the Eleanor he had known, yet somehow more contained, as if preserving her true self behind crystal glass. And then she stood, before him, close enough that he could detect the faint scent of her perfume, different from what she had worn in college, more sophisticated but with similar notes of jasmine. Julian, thank you for contributing to the exhibition. Eleanor's voice was steady, her hand extended professionally. Eleanor, the collection is impressive. Your curatorial vision is evident. He accepted her handshake, the brief contact sending currents of memory through them both. Around them, conversations continued, but between them stretched a private silence filled with unspoken histories. Eleanor broke it first. Your work has evolved beautifully, the Milltown series especially. It's extraordinary. Thank you. I was particularly interested in how the community reinvented itself after economic collapse, always finding the light in darkness. Eleanor said softly, almost to herself. Julian's expression shifted subtly. Some stories deserve that approach. Others require harsher truths. Before Eleanor could respond, the Foundation's board chairman called for attention, beginning his welcome address. They separated, moving to different positions in the room, yet remained acutely aware of each other's presence throughout the speeches. Later, as guests circulated through the exhibition, Eleanor found Julian studying his own installation, his back to the room. The placement works well, she said, joining him. The natural light during daytime hours will enhance the gradual shift from despair to possibility. Julian turned. You always understood visual progressions intuitively. I remember that from your thesis work. The reference to their shared past hung between them. Eleanor glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Julian, I wonder if we might speak privately before the evening ends. There are things I should have said years ago. Something flickered in his eyes, caution perhaps, or reluctance. I'm not sure reopening old wounds serves either of us now. Not to reopen, perhaps to finally close properly. Eleanor's composure wavered slightly. My office, when you're ready. Just ask Priya to direct you. She left him there, continuing her duties as host while uncertainty coursed through her. Had she overstepped? Was it selfish to seek closure when he had clearly moved forward? An hour later, as the reception wound down, Julian found himself outside Eleanor's office. The rational part of him advised leaving without this conversation. He had built a successful life without explanations or apologies. Yet some deeper instinct propelled him to knock. Eleanor's office reflected her perfectly, elegantly appointed but functional, with carefully chosen artwork and a spectacular view of the city. She stood as he entered, gesturing to a sitting area, removed from her desk. Thank you for coming. She offered him a drink, which he declined. For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of their history pressing between them. Julian finally spoke. You wanted to talk. I'm listening. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap, then consciously relaxed them. First, I want to congratulate you properly. Your success is well-deserved and entirely your own achievement. Thank you, but I doubt that's what you wanted to discuss privately. Eleanor met his gaze directly. No, I needed to tell you the truth about what happened before you left for Berlin. My father orchestrated that fellowship to separate us. Julian's expression remained carefully neutral. I suspected as much. Eventually. What you couldn't know is that he threatened more than just my inheritance or position. He threatened to withdraw funding from the Philadelphia Youth Arts Center, where you volunteered. He made it clear the consequences of my defiance would hurt more than just me. Julian's composure finally faltered. So you ended things to protect you from having to choose between your career opportunity and the program that meant so much to you. To protect those kids from losing their arts education? Eleanor's voice remained steady, even as tears gathered in her eyes. I thought I was being selfless, but perhaps it was cowardice disguised as sacrifice. The silence that followed felt both infinite and momentary. Why tell me this now? Julian finally asked. Because carrying this untruth has been exhausting. Because seeing your work in this gallery made me realize how proud I am of who you've become, even if I'm not part of your story anymore. Eleanor brushed away a tear with elegant precision. And because my daughter recently asked if I was happy, and I couldn't honestly say yes. Charlotte, Julian said quietly. I saw photographs online. Eleanor nodded. She's 4. The best thing, from a marriage that should never have happened. She hesitated. And you? Is there? No one permanent, Julian replied. My work has been my primary relationship. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows as the confession between them created a fragile new space. Not quite reconciliation, not quite closure, but something honest after years of carefully maintained distance. We should join the others, Eleanor finally said. People will be leaving soon. Julian stood but made no move toward the door. Would you have come to Berlin if your father hadn't interfered? The question, direct and unavoidable, hung between them. Yes, Eleanor answered without hesitation. I had actually researched art history programs there. I was going to apply after telling you I'd come. She smiled sadly. I had even begun learning German phrases secretly. Julian absorbed this revelation, his expression softening. Ich habe dich nie vergessen. Eleanor's eyes widened at his perfect pronunciation of, I never forgot you. I learned German too, he explained. Spent 3 years there after the fellowship ended. The moment stretched between them, filled with the poignancy of parallel journeys that might have been shared. A gentle knock interrupted them. Ms. Blackwood, the chairman is looking for you for the closing remarks, Priya called through the door. Thank you, I'll be right there, Eleanor responded, then turned back to Julian. I should go. Of course. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'm in New York until Sunday. Perhaps we could continue this conversation, coffee maybe? The invitation, casual yet significant, hung between them. I'd like that, Eleanor replied. Saturday morning? There's a place near the park Charlotte loves for their hot chocolate. She'll be with her father, so just us, Julian finished. To talk. They rejoined the reception separately, each carrying a sense of weightlessness that comes when long-held secrets are finally released. Throughout the remaining event, their gazes occasionally met across the room, no longer filled with caution or restraint, but with a tentative wonder at the possibility that fate, having once torn them apart, might now be offering an unexpected second chance. As the guests departed and Eleanor bid the last artist goodnight, she found herself standing alone in the gallery, surrounded by photographs that told stories of loss and renewal. Her phone chimed with a message from Julian. Central Park Cafe, 10 a.m. Saturday. Some stories deserve second chapters. For the first time in years, Eleanor left the gallery with something that felt remarkably like hope, as summer stars shimmered in the Manhattan sky above her. Full circle. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect summer weather that seemed almost suspiciously orchestrated, gentle sunshine, a light breeze carrying the scent of Central Park's greenery, and a crystalline blue sky stretching overhead. Eleanor arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, selecting a table on the terrace, with partial shade. She ordered a cappuccino and tried to quiet her racing thoughts. At precisely 10 o'clock, Julian appeared. He wore casual weekend clothes, dark jeans, and a simple button-down shirt that reminded Eleanor more of the student she had known than the successful artist from the exhibition. Something about seeing him in this less formal context made her heart constrict. Good morning, he said, joining her. Good morning. I ordered coffee, but still take it black? When she nodded, Julian smiled. Some things don't change. A server took his order, leaving them momentarily without distraction. Eleanor studied Julian's face in the honest morning light. The new lines around his eyes, the slight silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the more defined angles of his features. Time had carved its subtle changes into them, both. Thank you for suggesting this, she said finally. I almost didn't, Julian admitted. Professional courtesy would have been simpler. And yet here we are. Here we are, he echoed, accepting his coffee from the returning server. Your revelation the other night? It explained much, but also opened new questions. Eleanor traced the rim of her cup. Ask them. I owe you honesty. Julian considered carefully before speaking. After Berlin, after you married, were you happy, even briefly? The question wasn't what Eleanor had expected, not about her father's manipulation or her decision to end things, but about what followed. It revealed Julian's most fundamental concern had always been her happiness, not his own wounded pride. Charlotte brings joy every day, she began carefully. But the marriage itself? No. It was performing a role I'd been rehearsing all my life, the perfect Blackwood daughter, finally fulfilling family expectations. Eleanor fed his gaze directly. I thought contentment might grow from commitment. It didn't. Julian nodded slowly. And your parents? Do they still control your choices? My father died 2 years ago, Eleanor said quietly. Heart attack during a board meeting. My mother has retreated to their Palm Beach home, largely uninvolved in the foundation now. She paused. His death forced me to examine which constraints in my life were externally imposed, and which I had internalized so completely I enforced them myself. And what did you discover? That I've been living within carefully drawn boundaries long after the people who created them stopped patrolling the perimeter. Eleanor's smile held a touch of sadness. That's why this exhibition matters so much to me. It's the first major project that's entirely my vision, not an extension of the Blackwood legacy. Julian's expression softened. It's exceptional work. The curation shows tremendous sensitivity to each artist's perspective, while creating a coherent narrative across diverse experiences. Your inclusion was intentional, Eleanor admitted. Not just because your work deserved it, though it absolutely does, but because I needed to face this unresolved part of my past. She hesitated. I hope that wasn't selfish. Maybe we both needed resolution, Julian replied. I've wondered over the years what actually happened, why someone who seemed so genuine could suddenly embrace the very value system she had seemed to reject. I never embraced it, Eleanor clarified. I surrendered to it. There's a difference. Julian nodded, understanding. And now? Are you still surrendering? The question hung between them, deceptively simple, yet profoundly complex. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming text. She glanced at it apologetically. Charlotte's father. He's dropping her off early today. She looked up at Julian. Would you like to meet her? The invitation was spontaneous, surprising them both. Julian's expression registered, momentary hesitation, then softened. I'd be honored. They walked together through the park toward Eleanor's apartment, their conversation shifting to the present, Julian's upcoming projects in Japan, Eleanor's plans to expand the foundation's educational programs. The carefully maintained distance between them gradually dissolved with each step, replaced by a cautious familiarity. Charlotte knows about my work as a photographer, Julian asked as they neared her building. She knows I curate exhibitions, featuring many artists, Eleanor replied. She's quite observant for her age. Notices details most adults miss. Like mother, like daughter, Julian said softly. Eleanor smiled, then gestured toward a playground where a dark-haired little girl in a yellow dress was saying goodbye to a tall man in tennis clothes. There she is, with Thomas. Julian watched, as Charlotte hugged her father, then spotted Eleanor and came running, pigtails bouncing. Thomas noticed Julian standing with Eleanor, his expression briefly curious before he waved and departed. Mommy, we had pancakes with blueberry faces, Charlotte announced, colliding with Eleanor's legs. That sounds delicious, sweetheart. Eleanor smoothed her daughter's hair. Charlotte, this is Mr. Rivera. He's one of the photographers in the exhibition I told you about. Charlotte tilted her head, studying Julian with frank curiosity. Do you take pictures of people or things? Julian crouched to meet her at eye level. Both, but mostly people living their everyday lives. Why? Because ordinary moments contain extraordinary stories if you pay attention. Charlotte considered this seriously. I have a camera. It's purple. I took 37 pictures of our Neighbor's cat. Julian's genuine laugh, warm and unrestrained, caused Eleanor's heart to flutter unexpectedly. That shows dedication. The best photographers are persistent. As they walked to Eleanor's apartment, Charlotte peppered Julian with questions about cameras, light, and whether he had ever photographed elephants. He had in Thailand. Her unfiltered enthusiasm reminded Eleanor painfully of her own younger self, before pragmatism had overtaken passion. At the apartment, Charlotte insisted on showing Julian her collection of photographs, arranged meticulously in a purple album. While the child was occupied searching for it in her room, Eleanor and Julian found themselves momentarily alone in her sunlit living room. "She's remarkable," Julian said. "So vibrant and curious." "She saved me," Eleanor admitted quietly. "When I felt most trapped in a life I hadn't truly chosen, she gave me purpose beyond obligation." Charlotte returned with her album and a small, digital camera, commanding Julian's full attention as she displayed her artistic efforts. Eleanor watched their interaction. Julian's genuine interest, Charlotte's growing comfort with him, and felt an unexpected longing for something she had long ago convinced herself was impossible. Later, after Charlotte had exhausted her photographic collection and gone to play in her room, Julian examined the artwork on Eleanor's walls. Not the valuable pieces one might expect in a Blackwood home, but works by emerging artists, many from backgrounds similar to his own. "Your collection surprises me," he observed. "These are personal acquisitions, not foundation pieces," Eleanor explained. "Artists whose perspectives I find compelling." Julian nodded, then noticed a familiar book on her shelf, a limited edition monograph of his work published 2 years earlier. "You have my book." "I have all of them," Eleanor admitted. "I've followed your career from the beginning." The confession hung in the air between them. Julian turned to face her fully. "Eleanor, what are we doing here? Is this closure or something else?" She met his gaze steadily. "When we parted, I was a different person, someone who allowed fear of disapproval to override her own heart. Meeting you again, I realized how much I've changed, yet how some feelings remain unaltered despite time and distance." "What feelings?" Julian asked quietly. Eleanor took a deep breath. "Regret, certainly, but also something I thought I'd successfully buried. Something that resurfaces every time I look at your photographs and recognize the perspective of the man who once saw beauty in me when I couldn't see it in myself." Julian moved closer, close enough that Eleanor could see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes. "I never stopped seeing that beauty. Julian, I have a child, a complicated life, responsibilities that can't be set aside. I'm not asking you to set anything aside," he said gently. "I'm just wondering if there might be room in that life for something new, or something old, rediscovered." Eleanor's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "I don't know how to do this, how to trust that I won't make the same mistakes again." "By remembering you're not the same person who made those mistakes," Julian replied. "Neither am I. We've both built lives we can be proud of. The question is whether those lives might be enriched by reconnecting." From Charlotte's room came the sound of childish humming, a reminder of the stakes involved. Eleanor had protected her daughter fiercely from uncertainty, perhaps too much so. "I can't rush into anything," she said finally. "Charlotte has experienced enough disruption with the divorce." "I'm not suggesting rushing," Julian assured her. "I'm suggesting possibility. Dinner, perhaps. Conversations. Space to discover who we've become rather than dwelling on who we were." The simple reasonableness of his proposal, so different from the passionate urgency of their youth, touched Eleanor deeply. This was not the headlong fall of first love, but something potentially more enduring. A conscious choice made with full awareness of its complexity. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'm in New York until next Sunday. Then Tokyo for 3 weeks." Julian hesitated. "But I've been considering a more permanent base here. My agent has been suggesting it for commercial work reasons." The implication wasn't lost on Eleanor. "That would make conversation easier than transcontinental phone calls." "Much easier," Julian agreed, his smile reaching his eyes. Charlotte emerged from her room then, breaking the moment with requests for lunch and park time. Julian gracefully prepared to depart, kneeling to say goodbye to the little girl. "It was an honor to see your photography, Miss Charlotte. Perhaps someday we could take pictures in the park together." Charlotte's face lit up. "Can we, Mommy?" Eleanor met Julian's gaze over her daughter's head. "I think that could be arranged." At the door, Julian paused. "Thank you for today, for your honesty last night, for everything. Will you call me? When you're settled in Tokyo?" "I will." He hesitated, then gently touched her cheek, the first physical contact between them beyond handshakes in 8 years. Some stories deserve not just second chapters but entire new volumes. After he left, Eleanor stood at the window with Charlotte, watching Julian cross the street below. Her daughter leaned against her, thoughtful. "I like your photographer friend, Mommy. He looks at things the way you taught me to, really seeing them, not just looking." "Yes," Eleanor agreed softly. "That's always been his gift." Later that evening, after Charlotte was asleep, Eleanor finally opened the drawer where she had kept Julian's handmade book of photographs all these years. She turned the pages slowly, seeing her younger self through his lens, unguarded, luminous, full of promise. On the final page, beneath his long-ago inscription about seeing the world through eyes that truly love, she found something she had somehow missed before, a smaller note in the corner, almost invisible unless one knew to look for it. "If paths diverge, remember this. True sight finds its way home eventually. J." Eleanor traced the words with her fingertip, tears blurring her vision. Outside her window, summer stars glimmered over the city, the same stars that had witnessed their parting and now, perhaps, their new beginning. In her bedroom, her phone chimed with a message from Julian. "Dinner tomorrow? 7 p.m.? I know a place where the lighting makes everyone look like their best selves." Eleanor smiled through her tears and typed her reply. "Yes. It's time we both stepped fully into the light." As she set the phone down and closed the book of photographs, not returning it to its drawer but placing it on her bedside table where she could see it, Eleanor felt the final walls around her heart begin to crumble. The path ahead wasn't certain, but for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. Outside, a summer rain began to fall gently on the city streets, not the winter snow that had marked their parting, but a warm, life-giving shower that promised renewal. Full circle, Eleanor thought. Not an ending at all, but the beginning of something both familiar and entirely new.